Action Activators series, where we're having conversations with leaders on different fronts of environmental action. And today we have with us Jesse Barrett from Rodale Institute. Rodale is a global leader in the organic and regenerative food movement. The Institute was established in 1947 by founder J.I. Rodale, and they have headquarters in Kutztown, Pennsylvania. They put science behind organic agriculture through solutions-based research, farmer training, consumer education, and fully producing farms that supply organic food to Pennsylvania communities and restaurants. Here's a quick video that shows more about Rodale Institute's work and how they are really a key player in advancing regenerative food systems.
For as long as people have been farming, nearly 10,000 years, organic methods were the norm. But during the last century, the rise of chemical-based agriculture has dramatically changed the way we produce our food. Increasingly corporate and mechanized, today's conventional farms are saturated with synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. Now, we're feeling the consequences: erosion, water pollution, toxic chemicals in our food supply, and the lack of biodiversity, just to name a few. If we continue on this path, there will soon come a time when our soil gives out, and we'll be unable to feed our children and grandchildren. But positive transformation is possible. Since 1947, Rodale Institute has pioneered a better way of farming by conducting research into the cultivation of healthy, living soils. Way back then, we called the approach organic, and an entire movement was born. From the very beginning, we knew that farming practices focused on healthy soil would lead to healthier foods, and ultimately, healthier people too. Our research is evidence that organic can feed the world. Organic farming goes beyond merely trying to sustain our broken system. Over time, it can actually regenerate the health of our impoverished soil and mitigate the effects of climate change. For over 70 years, we've never wavered in our focus on growing the organic movement. The time for true healing has come. Healing our soil, our planet, and our bodies through regenerative organic agriculture is not only possible, it's inevitable. Join the movement. Support Rodale Institute, because the future is organic.
Joining me today from Rodale is Jesse Barrett. He is their food production specialist, and he manages their farm's food distributions and all of Rodale's community interactive food programs. Jesse also has many years of experience working in the restaurant industry, so we'll be asking him about the important relationship between chefs and farmers. We'll also discuss the impact on and the importance of local food systems during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jesse.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
And can you start by just telling us a little bit about what your position at Rodale Institute involves?
Sure. So I am a food production specialist. So I really concentrate on the harvesting of the food, the grading of the food, the processing of the food, food safety, the logistics of our food deliveries and CSA deliveries, and the community engagement and sales aspect, whether we sell to a restaurant or a local farm stand, or we do these mobile farmers markets, and we have like a little food truck basically that we drive around to different places in Allentown and Reading, Pennsylvania, and set up either pop-up farmers markets, and some of them are more established where you can consider us a vendor.
And that's such a good model that other farmers could reproduce, that mobile farmers market concept.
Definitely, especially where they have low food access, but it might be difficult to actually start a traditional farmers markets, because then those vendors are dependent upon like a certain level of sales. It can be difficult to start them in urban populations and low food access areas, even in rurally speaking, without having these really established farmers markets to compete against. So it's like easier just to take the food to the people who need it.
We were having this conversation in mid-April, when COVID-19 is really changing things up in our economy and every part of our lives, basically. Can you speak to how COVID-19 has affected your work directly at Rodale, both logistically and how you guys have had to shift your operations?
In the Lehigh Valley community, we did get a lot of support initially. We had a lot of support from Penn State Extension, our chapter of Buy Fresh, Buy Local. We've been doing webinars and local farmers market manager kind of meetings and conference calls. Everybody trying to support each other and come up with ideas of how we can operate with safely, but still provide food for people. And the need for food is so high now, you can argue higher than years previously when I participated in this program. So we just didn't want to stop doing it, but we want to do it responsibly as well. Once we started getting guidelines from Governor Wolf's office and our local health bureau, that the models we had for farmers markets and CSA distribution were not going to be able to operate the same way. Mostly the farmers markets, usually, you want a color block and set out your food and like really pretty displays and allow people to peruse it. And farmers markets are designed for people to stay, and check out the musician or pet your friend's dog. And it's completely opposite now. It's all about try to pay online, pre-pack the food, no contact delivery of the food, and no bans, no grand openings. I actually, one of the major things that I was super disappointed about is because we do a lot about food education. We have to grow food seasonally here, of course, so we tend to grow a lot of cold crops, spinach, lettuce, kohlrabi, kale, and not everybody in the community, the underserved communities we go to understand the food or know how to use it. So we do a lot of food demonstrations with partner organizations like the Food Trust, or our Second Harvest Food Bank has a program called Cooking Matters here. So we'll actively say, this is how you can use kohlrabi, or they even design recipes that might be more, culturally appropriate for the neighborhoods we're in, but just adding kale to it or something. With the COVID pandemic, we're not allowed to hand out food samples or, do cooking demonstrations and hand out the food. So that was one major thing that affected the farmers markets specifically.
Can you speak a little to how the importance of local food systems is becoming apparent in the midst of the pandemic and moving forward?
Yeah, definitely. We periodically sell some of our produce overages to local farm stands. And I was talking to one of the farmer and farm store manager there. She said that she was, on certain days, she's 12 times busier than she normally is, especially when the COVID first, the fear of it caused that panic buying in the beginning. It wasn't just toilet paper that the stores were out of. Even when I was a little late to get to the grocery store myself during that time, and all the produce shelves were empty at the store I go to out here. So quickly people identified that, there's these local farm stands and they have produce. So that was a great thing to see. I thought that was fantastic. Personally speaking, I was selling some of that same overages to one of our CSA members. Even though the CSA is not open now, he reached out to me and said, hey, can I get eggs from you guys and any vegetable you have? I don't care what it is. He wanted to let me know how important it was to him that, he knows me personally, and that this food was very short in the supply chain. It was grown 20 minutes from his house. It was harvested by 2 people and delivered by 1. Whereas grocery store food coming from, we were talking about before, maybe even Mexico or California, think about how many warehouses and how many these huge corporate farms, how many people touched it, how many people processed it, how many people packaged it, the truck driver loading it, driving it across the country, another truck driver, unloading it. So there's many of these points of contact in the supply chain that, is a possibility for a contamination, or not only with COVID, but even other, foodborne illnesses.
Right. I was going to say that it's a good opportunity for us to really think about that whole supply chain and how many hands do it does go through, not just for pandemic reasons, but for environmental impact and carbon footprint and self-sufficiency to your region and everything. So it's a good time to really acknowledge that. At Rodale, you guys also do a lot of educational programs for farmers to shift their operations to be regenerative, as well as consulting and workshops. Can you speak a little to how that's been changed? Are you guys offering virtual workshops now, or how will that change going forward for the next couple months?
Yes, definitely. We just had a webinar yesterday on composting like a pro, so that should have been an in-person one. We usually bring them here to the farm so they can get, they will actually have you turn compost by hand and, look at different bins and like different styles of composting. You get to really interact with Rick Carr, who's our farm director, and our compost production specialist too. And so it was definitely done on like a webinar, a Zoom platform. Yes, so for the rest of this foreseeable season, it's looking like that'll be the case. If anybody's interested in any of the educational programming, they could go to our website, www.rodeleinstitute.org, and just find the events page. It's one of the drop-down menus, and then you can go month by month and see what webinars are offered, or things like our plant sales and things like that.
And for you, coming from or having done work in the restaurant field, to kind of speak to that for restaurant managers and buyers who want to source locally, but as you know, there's a lot of barriers to doing that. Mm-hmm. What are just a couple of general tips that you have for that relationship improving?
What I most find is restaurant managers want to do it, let's say, but they don't know like where to start. It's just that they're just as busy as farmers, restaurant managers. They probably work 55, 60 hours a week and work at night when farmers are sleeping. So right. How are you gonna call somebody at like 10:30 and even like later than that? So I encourage people to reach out. There's usually community organizations in every city. Ours happens to be Buy Fresh, Buy Local, which is a national, nonprofit organization, but I'm sure there's others with the same missions, depending on the region of the country. If you start there, they usually have like growers, buyer kind of like summits. So they'll invite all these farmers looking to, sell food. Obviously, we're always trying to do that. And then, that's really where you can connect, like, hey, I'm a restaurant manager. I control the buying. I can authorize buying tomatoes from you. And I just didn't know that, oh my God, you guys are 10 miles away from my restaurant. I had like no idea. You could literally be that close and kind of not mix the connection, just because the restaurant managers aren't going to cold call farms. It's not really in their job description either, to do that. But I find once that relationship started, then, you'll say, oh yeah, I love buying your tomatoes, but I really we're really looking for potatoes. Well, my buddy grows potatoes in the next county. And then that's where you can start making these, connections. Another thing I think restaurant managers get a little concerned about is that one thing that the supply chain and corporate producers do well is the grading and the quality control of the food. So they're very used to getting like, let's say a case of tomatoes or something that looks very uniform, that are all similar sizes, just because those larger corporation farms usually have the infrastructure to kind of buy the machinery and things that take that time. But I find that the produce is beautiful from the local farms too. They just grade it in a different way. They do it either by hand or by eye, and some of them do have the equipment to do it. So, that's definitely not an issue. So I don't think restaurant buyers should be concerned about that as much. And photos go a long way, especially chefs in like the higher end restaurants. They're very visually stimulated. So I noticed even when I was doing an email blast to local restaurants, all I did was put a picture on what was new that week, and like the sales went up. Because like you could just see the picture in the thumbnail, and then that was causing them to click it. So
before I let you go, do you have, I know there's probably many, but a call to action for your community or the general public around the work of Rodale and your work specifically there?
Yeah, right now, one of the biggest things I see is that there's a lack of volunteers at food banks. I know you've all probably seen in the media the big pictures of Pittsburgh and San Antonio with like miles long lines of cars for food banks. Remember that everybody is mostly laid off in like the service industry and from restaurants to anything else like that. So food insecurity has definitely skyrocketed. I feel like I've been studying this stuff for a few years now, so it was like kind of like obvious to me, but I'm starting to see the terms when I watch the news now that I've been working with all these grants for years. Food insecurity, lack of food access, even how COVID has been like affecting like urban and minority populations disproportionately. The death rate is higher for urban and the minority populations in the cities. And they're the ones struggling with food access too. It's all connected. So it just like reach out to food banks. There's lots of regional food policy councils are really important because you usually get a multitude of food industry people on there, from food banks to farmers to like restaurant owners, and it just is like, that would be a way to get involved very quickly, I think. Also, I want to kind of emphasize the importance of growing your own food. Even the simple act of starting a garden. I know there's a lot of like the concept of liberty gardens or freedom gardens are coming back. That was like popular during World War II. If you can grow food for yourself, everybody always has too much squash, right? Everybody always has too much tomatoes. You always overplant. You could take that to a food pantry now. I know a lot of people are doing like a plant a row program kind of. So, maybe plant an extra row in your garden and say that, row goes to a food bank, and then you can drop it off there. Those would be my easy things to get involved with right away.
That's great. Thank you. And such important acts and points that you brought up. So I appreciate that. And thank you so much, Jesse, for your time.
Thank you.
For folks watching, you can find out more information at rodaleinstitute.org. And like Jesse said, you can go to their events and check out their virtual webinars that they're doing. And this is for folks internationally, not just in Pennsylvania, as well as information on their programs within Pennsylvania. And they have really cool videos where you can tour their facilities, which is really fun for farmers and non-farmers to get inspired. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Jesse. We appreciate all the adjustments you guys are making to get food out to where it's needed. So thank you for your work.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about my program and Rodale Institute in general.